Oh, I just turned off my video. There we go. All right, so we are recording. Again, welcome everybody. I'd like to get started here with some introductions of the fantastic alums that we have here. Um, so, uh, Katie, would you like to kick us off? Tell us a little bit about your year at the college, what you studied, and then kind of just briefly your professional journey and what you're working on now.
Hi everyone, my name's Katie, and I graduated from Holy Cross in 2022. I was an English major at Holy Cross, and had an art history minor. And after graduating, I started working at Saks Off Fifth as a merchandise assistant. Um, and I was on the men's and kids footwear team. And then, after about 2 years in that role, I am now an assistant buyer on the men's active and swimwear team. And before that, I actually had an internship, which I got through Holy Cross, working for an alumni at Jack Rogers on their wholesale team. So I kind of got to see a little bit of the wholesale side of fashion in that internship role, and then decided that I wanted to pursue jobs on the buying side after graduation.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Most importantly, you were a peer career assistant in the Center for
Yes,
Career Development, I think, as well. You
I
forgot
was,
that.
of
So why don't
course.
we kick it over to Joe? Joe, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your journey to where you are now?
All right. Hi, my name is Joe. I graduated in 2017. And while I was at Holy Cross, I was a history major and an Italian minor. And I got more interested in fashion and kind of just expressing myself while I studied abroad in Bologna, Italy. And then through that, I ended up networking a little bit through Holy Cross. There was some sort of virtual networking event, and the media communications fashion room was relatively empty. So I started talking to more alumni there. Ended up hearing more about merchandising through them and how that could kind of connect to my history major. And then I got internships through just random connections, and then cold applied to a position on LinkedIn at DKNY and Karl Lagerfeld as an admin. And then from being an admin, I ended up learning a little bit about each department, sales, production, merchandising, design, and then realized I could really go more into merchandising and have evolved from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. As you know, and everyone will find out here, admins do all the work in any office. Last but not least, Catherine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Broadbent. I graduated college in 2013, so definitely the oldest one of the bunch here, which is the first time I've had to say that in a while. And know Ben for many, many years. He's an amazing resource. I double majored at Holy Cross also in history and sociology, and I knew very early on in my time that I wanted to be involved in fashion. I interned while at Holy Cross at Coach. And so I was very interested then. And then after I graduated Holy Cross, I ended up at a company that is now, it was called the Jones Group, but now it's called One Jeanswear Group. And I work for Jessica Simpson on her line, and I ended up in wholesale. And I had no exposure to wholesale, and I didn't really know anything about it. And I've now been in wholesale ever since. And I moved on to different other companies that were licensors. But for the bulk of my career, I was at Kate Spade. So it kind of felt like coming home after being at Coach. They're one company. If you're not familiar, Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman, it's all one company. And I just recently left Kate Spade, very, very recently, and I am now at Tory Burch. So I have been in the bulk of my career in handbags and leather goods and wholesale, and I am the senior sales manager at Tory Burch, overseeing all of their wholesale business exclusively with Nordstrom's, and overseeing all of their partnerships with them. So I work kind of with department stores, and when you guys go and shop at a department store, I oversee those partnerships. So rather than the direct consumer business, I've always been about external partnerships. So that's really been the sector that I'm in. And I'm really excited to talk with all of you because I feel super passionate about Holy Cross and super passionate about this. So
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So we're going to get the career counselory questions out of the way first. So nobody here was a fashion major. Everybody went to a liberal arts school. So how did you all leverage your liberal arts background in the work that you do in your job search, and how does it maybe impact you kind of on a daily basis? And we'll go in reverse order here. So we'll start with Catherine.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and one that I sit on a lot because transparently, you go into this industry, and I think like the contemporaries I'm with here will hear that you meet a lot of people that go to fashion school and that go to like an LIM or an FIT, and there's a lot of those people, and you're not going to be one of them. So I think what's great about going to Holy Cross is that you'll always have a well-rounded background, which I know you hear when you're kind of applying there, but being a sociology major, I think it helped gear me towards why I'm in wholesale a lot. I reflect on that a lot. Sociology was the study of people. It's about like why people tick, why people behave the way they do, why people do what they want. And my huge bulk of my job is connecting with people, like picking up the phone, making people feel good, making people feel comfortable with my partnership. I know Katie works at Saks. I've worked with Saks as a partner for them. And a huge part of partnership is, making them feel like they can come to me and get answers done. And it's an open door in communication. And I leverage that, like, okay, what makes them feel good? Like, what do they need? Like, what is it about people that's what they need? So sometimes it's not like a direct, like, I learned this in a textbook at Holy Cross. It's like the bigger, like, this was what I was passionate about at Holy Cross. And this is like gearing me in the sector of this business I'm excited about. So I think about that a lot. I also majored in history, and in wholesale, a lot of my business, the stronger you get in wholesale is the longer you're in a role and the more history you have. So, like, I love being like, this is what we did last year. Like, this worked 2 years ago. We can't do this handbag again. It totally bombed. We can't do this again. We need to give them something new. So I love like having the data to like support my argument with people. So I think as the older I've gotten, you left school and you're like, but I didn't learn this. Like, this has nothing to do with what I learned. And it's more about those like broader strokes of like that you have a foundation of like being big picture. And the bigger you get in your career, the more they want you to zoom out. And that's how you level up. So
Awesome. Joe, how's the liberal arts impacted your career?
Actually, I was gonna answer that similar to how Catherine did. Just being a history major too, it one allows you just to make different connections, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, in that sense of, oh, this shoe didn't really sell that well. Oh, we haven't historically done that well with ballet flats. Also, at the same time, it just allows you to have a more global mindset and connect with customers all over the world. For instance, we have a Milan office that I communicate with daily, and just being abroad in Italy when I was at Holy Cross and being able to study Italian has allowed me to kind of understand the Italian, the European customers more. We're also working with a Spanish retailer now, so just being able to have a more global mindset has been just very beneficial that way. And just also being able to be under the mindset of, oh, you can take on whatever as a liberal arts student, whether it's not even just history, even if it's outside of your major, you just have to have some sort of willingness to learn and to adapt. And maybe you want are like gun ho on going in on merchandising or sales or design, and then in the end you learn that you can actually work better in some other area in the industry.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Katie?
Similarly to what Catherine was saying, I definitely have noticed that like a majority of my coworkers did go to a fashion specific school. And we were actually talking about it the other day because a lot of them didn't realize that I was an English major because that wasn't the initial team that I had joined. And they were surprised to hear that I was an English major because they had all gone to super specific and they were all in super specific like fashion and retail programs. And they were like, "Oh, what did you want to do like with your major?" And I was like, "Exactly this. Like I always knew that I wanted to go into fashion and wholesaler buying and like I had known that kind of for a while." But yeah, so we were talking about that the other day, but I definitely agree. So like as an English major, I spent a lot of time writing and like formulating arguments in my papers and um I feel like through that I developed like a very systematic way of thinking, which I definitely use every day because I spend multiple hours a day emailing back and forth with the vendors and brands that we work with. So I think that like clear communication is crucial in all areas of life. But I've definitely um, used the writing skills that I fine-tuned at Holy Cross in my everyday life, especially in this role.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So I think we always talk in the Career Center around planned and unplanned events. Katie, you probably remember this in your PCA training a couple of years ago. I think sometimes in the perspective of students, and I've thought this way too, it's I major, I do well academically, I get an internship in this major, I go work in this major, and then I'm happily ever after, right? So I'm hoping that folks can talk a little bit about what are the planned and unplanned events that kind of led you to where you are now, during your time at the college and then during your time professionally? And why don't we start with Joe this time?
All right. So one of the more unplanned things I alluded to earlier was during that virtual networking event. I wasn't really that interested in the fashion industry at the time. I was just starting to kind of get into expressing myself in that while when I was in Italy. But then when I was back my senior year at Holy Cross, I had no idea what I wanted to do just as far as my professional career was. And I was more set on marketing, PR. I could see that being more connected to history and being able to write and communicate. And then just through that, I was able just to go into the fashion media communications room and talk to more fashion merchandisers. And that kind of sparked my initial interest. So I guess that is relatively unplanned as far as when I was in school. And then also relatively unplanned, I went to New York without any leads either. I just got a sublet in an apartment and then just started cold calling, networking, and eventually just found people who were willing to take on a liberal arts student as an intern.
So, thanks, Joe. Katie, how about you?
So when I've noticed that like a huge, I guess it was kind of planned and unplanned, but basically all of my past work experiences, aside from the internship that I had when I was at Holy Cross, were all, or the summer going into my senior year, were all connected. So I basically leveraged one connection and then like kept continuing connecting with other people at each company, which ultimately led to me getting my job that I currently have because I was an intern in high school um, for a temporary tattoo company, and they collaborated with like a bedding and interior design company. And then my manager at that company moved on to work at Saks Off Fifth. And so I just kind of like leveraged all of those connections and like stayed in contact with all of the people that I had been working with in all of these different experiences and roles. And so I think that like a huge, really important thing is staying connected with the people that you do meet because you never know when you'll work with them again or meet them in the future, or just even work with them like in a professional setting as like clients, even not for the same company. So I think that like it's super important to just stay in contact with all of the people that you meet.
Awesome. Catherine, what about you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really similar. It's like what I would say to my journey in a lot of ways when you talk about unplanned events, especially in the space that Katie and I are in and buying and wholesale. You meet with a lot of different people, and this business is very small, despite being a city of billions of people. You cross pollinate a lot. Um, I think for me, like I graduated Holy Cross and entered at coach, and there was a lot of expectation that like there would be a job waiting for you back at coach. I'm be really honest. There was not a job waiting for me back at coach when I graduated. And that was super discouraging. And I felt very defeated when I graduated school. I was like, why is there not this job? I didn't get it. And actually at the time, another girl had kind of swooped in at Holy Cross who interned at Marc Jacobs and like found an opportunity there that I didn't catch. So I ended up leveraging transparently a connection through someone my mom went to college with to end up at my first job. And so then as my career went on, I continued in my career and I worked for Jessica Simpson. I worked for this licensor of Ralph Lauren. I worked for a licensor of Nike. And it wasn't until Kate Spade called me. They found me on LinkedIn. They're like, "Oh, we saw you worked at Coach." This at this point was about 5, 6 years ago, and it was like a long time ago. I was like, "Oh, I thought my Coach connection, like my internship, meant nothing at this point." I was like, "Wow, thank you." And at the time, the CEO of Tapestry actually was a Holy Cross alum. The CEO of all these brands, his name was oh my God, Victor Lewis. He was the CEO. And I was interviewing for this like medium role. And I emailed him and was like, I went to Holy Cross. I know you don't know me. And he emailed me back and he's like, I'm sure they will take your internship into experience. So like never doubt going to school and how Holy Cross can help you. And also when I interviewed at Kate Spade, the VP that I was going to interview with previously worked with Carolyn Rizzoli, who, as we know, is like Holy Cross is like #1 fashion alum. She's like the crusader of fashion at Holy Cross. And she emailed Carolyn and was like, "What do you know about this girl?" And Carolyn was like, "Look, I've never had her work for me, but she's like really positive. She comes to all the events." So like I think these connections, like it's never just always about like, did you work for her or did you know it can come back 5, 6 years later. And like this was something that like really going to Kate Spade set me up for so much success later in my career. And there were these like two prongs of Holy Cross. So I think it was so like, if you graduate and you're like, oh my gosh, like, why isn't Holy Cross helping me now? Like, remember your career is really long and it can like keep helping you down the line.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Um, I'm really interested in hearing the answer to this next question. I asked this in every panel, but I think it's probably particularly salient here. How has the industry, in your view, changed since you arrived and sort of grown? And where do you kind of see it going and changing more? Let's start with Katie this time.
I think that in the past 2 years that I have been working in my at my current company, like I've definitely um noticed a lot of change because I feel like when I was first starting my job, a lot like I feel like the retail world was still recovering from COVID, and the effect that that had had on like shipping orders and getting orders from overseas and like a lot of logistics that had like delayed orders. And I was curious to see how that had such a lasting impact on like the retail climate, especially given that like it was, I guess, summer of 2022 when I first started. But like I could still see so many lasting effects of the pandemic on just the way that like everyone was kind of doing their jobs and like everything. So I definitely think that it's obviously changed on the past 2 years that I have been there since like initially kind of when I started and was learning about all of these post-pandemic effects. And I also think that like Saks Off Fifth is a luxury off-price retailer, and I think that it's been really interesting working in the off-price um, like retail landscape like at this point in time. And so I just have really enjoyed kind of seeing learning different things over the past 2 years about like just the retail world and the effects of just everything in the world on the retail world.
Awesome. Catherine, what was it like being in the industry during COVID? I can throw that in.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, and before too. Um, I think people are more, when I first started and have seen it evolved, I think people are more careful with their money than ever before. And people are not as like there used to be a little bit more like give and take with customers. Now like there's not as much give. Like we're very focused on price. And I also think what's really interesting for me is like there are brands that can emerge overnight and become so hot and then you can take a dramatic left and die like no tomorrow, like in a week. Like like there are a lot of brands that were so cool 6 months ago and now they're dead. And that's something I've never seen before. And I think I'd like, first, I kind of wanted to ask you guys, like, what are, where are you shopping? And like, what? Because you drive it and it's so like, there are things that came out in the summer that we can't fulfill, we can't keep up with. And we could probably get something to compete with it by January, but there's a good chance that by January that trend is over and it's so dead in the water and now you're stuck with that inventory. So that's one thing that I think is interesting. So I think where it's going is like, how do you keep up with changing social media rubbing up against trend?
Awesome. Joe, what do you think?
Similar to Catherine, I was also in the industry before the pandemic and I'm still in it after. And she has a point. It's very much price point driven, and people are tighter with their money and they're just looking for a reason not to buy a shoe, whether it's the brand, a specific component to a shoe. And overall, it's just everything's just so sensitive, and especially with footwear, the lead times and just producing everything is just a lot harder than it would be to produce a shirt or jeans or anything like that. So you just really have to just pick your moments, and I feel like that's something we focused on more like at during the pandemic and after was just really picking your moments, knowing that there's just logistical issues around everywhere and that maybe your goods might not be there at the right time. And I've even seen this in the last few years more so with climate change, especially during like the fall and the winter months. Like historically, October used to be way colder. And you would expect to have way more boot sales in quarter three, quarter four. And now you're looking at it and sneakers overall are just becoming way more important in footwear because they're really one of the few seasonless categories we have within shoes. So that's something I noticed in addition to just kind of a higher importance on the European markets, international markets, and also both just online retailers. Because with COVID, a lot of the US retailers, especially like the brick and mortar stores, it have either closed down or people are less likely to go shopping physically anymore.
I think like Gen Z. That's what I want to say. There's a big question mark on Gen Z, which you guys are. I feel like people have panels about Gen Z, how to unlock Gen Z, like what Gen Z is buying. Like I have attended many seminars about the Gen Z customer. So that's the big thing I will say.
Yeah, so if anyone has any suggestions for Catherine and
Thank you.
here, you can feel
Try
free to throw them in the chat. Maybe our alums can get something out of the conversation too. Brands you like, suggestions, all that sort of stuff. That would be I'm gonna skip down alums. We have a list of questions we're working off here just to let everybody else know. I'm gonna skip down a little bit. We've talked a little bit about networking. So I wanna jump down to a question about skills. So what do folks think are the particular skills and qualifications, both soft and technical, that are really important to your industry and I guess more specifically your role? So why don't we start with Joe this time?
All right. So, kind of skills that aren't as technical, I would say, is just being able to multitask and be able to adapt in like a fast-paced environment. I feel like that goes for any department within the fashion industry, whether you're design, sales, production. You just have to kind of be fast, be flexible, know that anything could get thrown at you because my day to day is just very different, whether I was an admin or a merch coordinator, pretty much a manager now. It's you could expect to do anything, whether it's just cleaning up a showroom or hopping in, helping out someone with the sales team, helping out someone with the production do something, working with IT. It could just be anything. And I feel like just being adaptable is something that you really have to be pride yourself on and know that just because something was done one day yesterday doesn't mean the same thing's going to be done the same way tomorrow. And then as far as technical skills, I guess within merchandising, you don't necessarily have to have a fashion merchandising background to get into it. It would be good to be both just analytical and creative, be able to do basic retail math, or just be quick on your feet in terms of just being able to calculate things, whether it's like a markup or the difference between like the wholesale, the retail, just being able to do percentages just in your head really helps. That's as far as like technicality goes with my role.
Awesome. Let's go over to Catherine.
My number one piece of advice, if you're going to take anything out of tonight, go take an Excel course on your downtime. I don't know if Holy Cross does this now, but when I graduated, I had zero Excel skills and I am in Excel all day long. I am building formulas. I'm doing it. It's my number one. If you take anything I say tonight, go do an Excel course on your downtime. I don't know, like chat GBT, something, but learn VLOOKUPs like the back of your hand, because the number one thing I ask when I'm hiring a sales assistant with 0 years of experience is if you can do a VLOOKUP. Even with 0 years. So, and there are going to be girls or guys that have that experience. So that's my number one piece of advice, technical skill. Um, and my second piece is, I think it's kind of like Joe said, we call it dealing with ambiguity, but dealing with like the gray area. I think when you're in school, you're really used to like a schedule and a routine and getting answers to your questions. Like you're going to go to class, you're going to get your homework, you're going to get an exam, you're going to get a result. A lot of time in the professional world, you're not going to get answers. And sometimes you're working on things and then it moves on to something else and then you don't. And you don't know the answers or you can't figure it out. And that was something I really needed to learn to work on. So just being aware that when you move on after school, life is less like checking boxes and it's more like bigger bubbles of gray.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Katie, thoughts on skills?
Similarly to what Catherine was saying, I like a huge thing is Excel, and I did take the Excel class that was offered at Holy Cross. I think it was like recorded sessions. And so I took that actually twice. I took it 2 summers, because I knew that I needed, like after the first time, I knew I needed to take another stab at it. And I have also really appreciated that, like my company, like some of the managers have done like extra trainings, like especially when I was first starting, there were a lot of girls who were all entering entry level positions and they kind of made like a little training group for us and showed us like some formulas that we might not have known that they knew would help save us time. And shortcuts. And like even now I'm going to an Excel training like session just as a kind of reminder session this week actually. So I think that like it's also really important to like keep up on the Excel skills. Um, but and that was one thing that intimidated me because I knew that going into fashion I would need to really learn Excel. So definitely good to prioritize that. And I think another thing is also just like again communication skills, like constantly communicating with your team and like dividing and conquering your list of tasks for the day. And I think that at Holy Cross it was super important to be organized, and that definitely transfers over um to jobs now.
I think it's great you expected to know Excel because like I didn't and like it caught me by surprise. So
Yeah, I feel like especially like after I did intern at Jack Rogers in wholesale and I saw how much time was spent in Excel, I like went back and I was like, okay, I need to do this again.
I know. I'm gonna ask later. Do you know Jen Masella there?
I don't know.
Okay. I think she came from Kate. So I was like, oh, I wonder if she knows my friend. Sorry,
Yes,
Ben.
no, you're good. You're good. This is what this is about. Everybody's making connections. I put the link to the Sioka Center, which is the business education wing of the college. They do an Excel workshop. That's what Katie was referring to, I believe. And then everybody at the college has free access to LinkedIn Learning with your Holy Cross email. So you can kind of, dump into, there's probably 6 million different Excel teaching lessons on LinkedIn Learning. So go check those out as well. Um, so moving down here, could you tell me a little bit, what would you say is something that's unique to the fashion industry and or your company? And then could you describe sort of like the culture of your industry and the culture of your company a little bit? Let's get started with Catherine this time.
I was like, wait, don't make me answer this first. I had to think about a nice answer. It's like, because the first answer popped in my head. Um, something unique to our industry. Um, I think you're going to do very, very high level work and not always you're going to have to really fight for yourself in this industry. You're going to do very high level work, and maybe you'll have contemporaries in financial services or in accounting or, big firms that are doing similar level work and maybe being compensated in different ways. And you're going to find that you're not being compensated in the same way. So you're going to have to really fight for yourself. So that's my be your biggest advocate. It's going to be something I would say. And then unique to either at Tori or Kate, I will say is people are really passionate about product and they drink the Kool-Aid of the brand super hard. It was like that at Kate, it's like that at Tori. You believe the brand, you wear the brand, you'll see people like you're not wearing any other brand. You wear that brand, you represent that brand. You like don't be wearing your Chanel flats or something like that. Like you, that's kind of how it is everywhere that you don't wear competition. And I think that's something that's really unique to us. Like we don't celebrate other brands. So yeah.
Awesome. You came up with something, Catherine. Good work. Katie, what would you say?
I guess something um yeah, I guess one thing um I sorry.
It's hard
It is
Yeah,
kind of
it
hard.
really is.
without being
Um
like negative.
Yeah,
So,
no, I think I definitely agree with Catherine. Like I think that everyone who works in fashion is definitely passionate about working in fashion, which I think is also encouraging too, to someone who's like starting off in the industry. Like I feel like that passion of your coworkers like really does like rub off on you, which is great. And I have also found that um like at Saks Off Fifth, since it is an off-price retailer, um, like we are buying a year in advance, but then we're also buying like 3 to 4 weeks in advance. So I think that that's also been something that's really interesting and cool because working in off-price, and like at any off-price retailer, you're in a really unique position to be kind of looking at current trends and seeing like what's working and what people want and buying it super quickly while also thinking a year in advance. So I feel like you kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of like looking at trends and you can act quickly to adapt to trends that you're seeing like every day on like TikTok or on social media or even seeing what other brands and companies are kind of going after. And I think that like all these things influence like habits as well.
So I would just say to all the alums here, you can feel free to give the students an unfiltered view of the industry. I think
All right.
you want them to be able to hear about sort of warts and all, right? Because it's not that's not something that's unique to fashion, right? That's going to be something that they're going to find warts and all wherever they go. So feel free to give them an unfiltered view.
I
Joe,
feel
what do you think?
I was gonna go down the same path Catherine was in the sense that you really do need to fight for yourself. And that's something I kind of learned as an admin is a lot of people in just other departments within the industry, they'll have a manager or like a kind of a just a break between them and the division president. If you're working directly under the division president a lot of the time, they're not necessarily seeing what you do day to day, even if you are their right hand. They're busy focused on the division making money and everyone else doing their jobs. So it really, while it's good in the same time that like you aren't micromanaged all the time, you really don't have someone immediately right next to you who gets what you do all the time. So you really do have to be able to fight for yourself, especially when money's tight, not only with our customers, but within divisions. You really just have to be able to fight for yourself that way, make sure that you can become fairly compensated. And it's not like other industries where people go into it making six figures right away. You really have to
yeah.
get yourself to that kind of point.
Yeah. I feel like if you want like to be unfiltered, I feel like I say this a lot. I'm like, my job is the Devil Wears Prada minus the couture, the trip to Paris, and the hot guy. Like it's late hours, it's looking really nice every day, it's really demanding bosses, it's really high expectations. Like it's it's like I feel like you get into it because you think it's going to be like this and it's not. And transparently your compensation, I mean, you're not going to be making as much money as your friends that are going to like a Deloitte, a Price Waterhouse Cooper. Like that's what I mean. Like you have to be prepared that your salary is not going to be as advantageous as you'd like it to be. And I think I've experienced it with sales assistants I've tried to hire. They're like, well, how am I supposed to live in New York City on this salary? My mom and dad like asking that. I'm like, that is not a question I can answer for you. And that's my, I think the biggest thing. Like, I was talking to a friend and she was like, yeah, in fashion, you don't get paid. And you're honestly doing as high level work as someone in finances. Like you move millions of dollars if you're in wholesale or buying, like you're moving big volume in some of these things. It just doesn't, you don't get the same salary and you have to really work up towards it. So
I also think another important thing, which I definitely was having trouble wrapping my mind around when I was a senior and graduating, was that a lot of my friends work in finance and I didn't understand how like they could all have jobs like before Christmas and I
yeah,
was like graduating without a
yes,
job. And I was really, really stuck on that, as Ben knows, because at that point I was working in the career center and was there like every day. Like so upset that I was graduating without a job. And everyone kept telling me, like Ben and Julie were like, don't worry, like all fashion jobs are immediate hires. Like you're not like missing out. You're not missing out on opportunities. Like just give it time. And that's exactly what happened. And I like took a few weeks after graduation, started looking, and then like it all happened in like a week, which is crazy and super fast, but like it all happened so quickly and I did not expect that to happen. And I was really letting myself get caught up on the fact that I was graduating without a job. But like it all ends up working out as long as you just like network and like I was calling jewelry at the career center like all of June. But then it all works out. You just have to kind of like give yourself some time to really look through potential opportunities.
yeah. I mean, I empathize a lot, and this was over 10 years ago. I graduated. Like, I was a mess my senior year. I pretty much ruined my senior year because I was so worried I didn't have a job. And I had friends that had jobs, and I was such a mess. And all summer, I like ruined my 3 months of summer because I didn't have a job. And my mother was like, you'll never get this time off again in your life. And she's so right. Like in the summer, fashion companies all have summer Fridays. They're not going to be hiring a ton. Come August, it's going to like open up and you're going to see like a million job offers open up and there's going to be a ton. So like in the summer, like still be keeping applying, like still definitely focus, but like, don't take your foot off the gas, I would say. But if it's like May 1st and you don't have anything, like don't panic. Like it is a very cyclical business, and it's a very also like it's depending on what brands are doing well in that time. And I think what I would spend the time doing is like think about you need to learn what entry level roles are titled right now because you may be like applying to like roles you're like, oh, I think that's like entry level, and it's not. So you should like learn that now, like what it means to be zero to like the 0 to 1 years entry level because like you don't want to waste your time on things. And make sure you're like networking with these all three of us because it could come June and my sales assistant could quit and I'd be like, oh, this great girl from Holy Cross is emailing me all the time. Like, I don't know if she's great, but she's got a great personality. Let's interview her. So, and that's really how these things work. So that's how I hired my last sales assistant. She was my old intern at Kate. Someone left and I was like, you always keep in touch. Do you want to come back and take this job? And that's how we hired her.
Awesome. Yes, tale as old as time. Everybody in finance gets jobs in September, right? Everybody else panics, right? The thing line I always use now is that nobody's posting on LinkedIn. I've applied to 55 jobs and still don't have one. So uh, there's a social media aspect to it, but there's a lot of people in those shoes. Um, so I've been talking a lot. I've been having a great time, but I do want to open things up to students to ask questions of these fantastic alums while we have them. So you can feel free to unmute yourself and just ask your question directly, or if you want to send me your question in the chat, I can do that. In order to give you all a moment to think, I am going to ask a quick question of everyone. Unless was somebody trying to jump in there? Thought I heard someone unmute themselves. No? Okay. Um, my question would be, what was that? Thought I heard somebody again. Okay, I'm hearing things. What advice would you give to your college self outside of the don't panic because you don't have a job? Um, why don't we start with Joe and go from there?
All right, the advice I would give my college self is focus really more on getting yourself to New York, whether it's just for a week, a month, whatever, just to kind of see how the industry starts there in this country. And honestly, I spent a lot of my internships and summers in Boston, and it's just you really have to kind of go down to the city, see it for yourself, network of alumni during your school breaks, make the most of that 1 month every winter. And I feel like that's kind of a good place to start. And I didn't do as much of that early on as I wanted to. And I kind of had to make up for lost time after I graduated.
Thanks, Joe. Katie.
I feel like mine would just be to enjoy your time at Holy Cross and to not take it for granted. Especially like when I was a sophomore. That's when COVID hit. And unfortunately, we had to leave Holy Cross. And so I feel like then after going back to Holy Cross after that, I feel like all of my friends and I did not waste a single day there. So just to like enjoy yourselves and enjoy your time at Holy Cross because it's a super special place and a unique experience.
Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had different advice than we said, but that really is my number one piece. Like don't freak out as long as you keep your foot on the gas and stay focused. Like don't worry because I worried so much and like I'm like 11 years out of school. I'm like I wish I could be like, "Oh, it's gonna be fine." So,
All right. We are officially open for student questions here. So feel free to unmute yourselves and jump in. Oh, I think we got one here. One sent in from Veronica is within your companies and roles, would you say the work environment is more competitive or collaborative? That is a fantastic question. Let's start with Katie.
So I definitely think that the at my company it is more collaborative than competitive. I have found that everyone I work with, whether they're in buying or planning or um like even in marketing or ecom, like I find that everyone is so willing to help you answer your questions, help you get your product to sell, help you kind of come up with ways to do that. And I also think that I definitely think that there is a little bit of a competitive edge to it because there are only so many roles that open every year for a certain job and it all depends on timing. Like after my first 2 years as a merchandise assistant, or around like a year and a half is when I kind of was starting to be like, okay, I'm ready for the next position. And like it definitely is a little bit of a waiting game because I had to wait for um, basically either for someone to leave or for someone to get promoted. And like there is an element of waiting. So I feel like in that respect, like it was definitely competitive because then there were a lot of people who had started when I did that were applying for the same assistant buyer roles. So I think that like in that realm it's competitive, but I think that it's more collaborative than competitive because I learn from the people that I work with every day and everyone's willing to help you.
Awesome. Catherine, what do you think?
I think for me in my specific sector, we are very collaboratively competitive. I am in a very specific type of the business where I work with a lot of very headstrong women who are eager and hungry for the next. So, but we have no choice but to be collaborative because we need each other to get the job done. Like I have to work with so many cross-functional partners, but we're also really hungry. Where I mean, when you're in sales, you're type A, you're big personalities. So I can only speak to my sector. So I would say we're very competitive and very collaborative at the same time.
Awesome. Joe, how about you?
I would agree with that as well. Like, we are generally very competitive, and especially I've seen it. I think it's kind of more so my company, more so than others, where it's very easy to kind of get siloed within your immediate department, where it's like, oh, you're competing with other salespeople, or it's, oh, sales versus production, or design versus merchandising, when really we're all on the same team, but it's very much easy to get into your own world and to kind of just, there's office politics in like every company. And I feel like in the fashion industry, where everything's just so stretched thin, people are budgets are, everything is, it's just that much easier to kind of get yourself caught in that global competitive mindset. When everything's go wrong, you're trying to, sometimes you have to kind of cover yourself or make sure that you have the information you need on hand, but at the same time, you do need to rely on others in order to get everything done.
Awesome. Thanks for that question, Veronica. That's a great one. Courtney is asking, how would you suggest exploring the fashion industry if you aren't 100% sure what career path within the industry is the best fit for you? Let's start with Joe here. Joe, what would you think?
I would think you should definitely start looking at if you happen to have connections at smaller companies. I would suggest starting there somewhere less corporate, more hands-on. That way you could kind of dip your toes into all different kinds of industry things within the industry. One of my first internships actually was with a fashion incubator that would kind of help independent brands launch whatever they do now. And then within that, I kind of got to explore like what these individual designers did, these individual business owners. I kind of got to look a little bit at sales, a little bit at merch. And it was kind of interesting for me to see with that, you really just are very hands-on. And that's kind of a way as an intern that you can really get more experience rather than being at a very corporate place where you're siloed into one position.
Yeah, that's great advice. Catherine, how about you?
I feel like a great way is just to like kind of think about your skills and like have a conversation with different alumni. How I ended up in, or and they don't necessarily have to be alumni from Holy Cross, it's like people that work in the industry. How I ended up in sales is like I actually networked with someone that like my father knew at the time who was like president at Halston, and she was like, I think you'd be really great in sales because I interned in merchandising. And she was like, you just have a really great personality for it. So sometimes just like talking with people, like who are in the business and like getting to know them and like telling them your interests could be a really great way. Um, I think Holy Cross sometimes offers like shadowing if you have opportunities to shadow people, or even just like researching the different buckets of like the fashion industry and like finding out what sounds good to you, and what clicks for you. I think that could just be a great starting point.
Awesome. Katie.
I definitely agree with Catherine. Like, I think it's definitely important to do some research because I definitely didn't realize, um, like how many different areas there are within, like, even going, like, working in retail, like, there's so many different areas. And I think, which Catherine was saying this earlier, but like also learning what the different like role titles are because they're different at every company. And so I think that like when I was kind of trying to figure out like what part of fashion I wanted to go into, I didn't know that much information at first about like what each role actually was and what they did. And I think another thing that you could do is like if you are looking to kind of see like what the different type of jobs are, like looking at the LinkedIn job descriptions, and like seeing what they're looking for in a candidate and what the like everyday tasks might include. I think that that was really helpful, because like when I was looking at kind of like also planning and buying, I was seeing that like I was seeing different information for each role and what the job actually included. So I think that that's also really helpful looking at the LinkedIn like descriptions, even for roles that like you wouldn't be applying to now, but that are posted on LinkedIn is just helpful for the future.
Awesome. I just shared in the chat the CCD has a fashion and merchandising one pager as well. So you can take a look at that. It'll give you some of those job titles that Katie was just talking about there. We might have time for one more quick question if anybody has one before we wrap up.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a junior. I was wondering what your favorite project you have worked on has been, and what was maybe challenging about it, and what you maybe found rewarding about it.
Why don't we start with Catherine?
Yeah, that's a good one. Um, I don't know if it's like a project, but like a passion, something I've done in my career that was like meant a lot to me is I really, when in my time with Kate Spade, I really built their Macy's business. I like really grew that from the ground up, and it's something that's very, very near and dear to my heart. The buyer there and I are very close. I'm seeing her actually tomorrow, and we started out in 16 doors together, and now and then it was in 73, and I renovated Herald Square there twice. I expanded the program. I built it out. I did exclusives. You know, just really built it from the ground up. So transparently, when I left Kate, that was a really hard thing to leave because I like love them and love that business. So that was something I was so happy, and it was a person too. It was someone that I was like, oh, I like sent her a letter when I left. I was like, I love you and I love what we built. This is so hard to leave you. So it's something that feels good. And it wasn't just business, it was like a human. So
Joe, how about for you?
All right. So this one actually kind of came up more recently. It was two projects, more so than just a specific instance. It was we had a new head of merchandising who oversaw both shoes and handbags, and he was still trying to kind of get a grasp on the business in general. And I kind of had to help him build a merch plan from like the ground up. And then I just like looked at the analysis, the bookings, everything. That was kind of what I did on my own, just while he wasn't around. And then he began to teach me how to think of things more in dollars rather than just pairs. So for that, me kind of just trying to get a quantitative hold on the business really helped there. And then through that, he let me just sit in on more development meetings, and I kind of got to have a better understanding of what our product was and the life cycle of it all because for a while I was just a person doing a lot of the data entry and kind of help keeping our systems afloat. But then once I was kind of able to prove myself on one project, he then kind of brought me in more into like the concept reviews, the sketch reviews. I then also got to help set up the showroom and decide where things actually went, both literally within the showroom and figuratively within our companies. So just being able to do one thing and do it well kind of leads you to do a lot more.
Awesome. Katie, how about for you?
I think that one of like the projects that I was like most kind of proud of that I had worked through was when I was on a merchandise assistant on our kids or men's and kids footwear team, but I was kind of in the process of like applying for assistant buyer roles and within my company, and like part of like a huge part of becoming an assistant buyer is kind of proving that like you have like developed the skill set that's required to write in order, or to like help write in order. So I had worked on an order for shoes that was like a production order. So it was like being written like a year and up to a year in advance. Um, and I think that I was like kind of most proud of myself for working through that order because it can be a lot of it could be very overwhelming to look at like all of these Excel files and spreadsheets and looking at all the data and analyzing like sales history. And I think that like when writing a production order, you are looking, which is in advance, you'd be looking at so much data. So I was like really kind of happy like working through that project because I think that it was kind of like a way that I was proving to myself that like I was ready for the next level, and also like proving that I had learned a lot in my role as a merchandise assistant. So I think that that was an exciting, and also to work with the product, look at the product, see it, like that was also really fun too. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know we're at time now, so please everyone join me in thanking these alums. I think the best we can do is an emoji of sorts. So we go, celebration emojis. Um, Alums, what is the best way for these students to connect with you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it email?
LinkedIn or email is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, either
Uh,
works.
are you guys okay with me sharing your emails with the folks who came to the event tonight?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Awesome. The other thing I wanted to plug to everyone, just confirmed today, Student Alumni Fashion Networking Night, January 8th in New York City, at Carolyn Rizzoli's home. Folks, I think, have mentioned this. I think everybody on the panel has been to that event before. Carolyn's awesome. She's sort of the fairy godmother of fashion for Holy Cross. And that's going to be a fantastic night. We literally just confirmed it, so it's not even in yet. Hopefully all three of these alums will be there, and amongst others. So please, again, thank you to our fantastic alums for being here. Thanks to students for taking some time. I know that we're staring down the barrel of like yeah, midterms and focusing on finals and all that sort of stuff. So thanks again to everyone. Joe, Catherine, Katie, if you could hang around for 1 second, I have one more favor to ask you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I just want to say too, I'm going to be on campus for the Women in Business Conference. I'm speaking on it then. So if any of you are there and want to connect, I would like love to meet you. I haven't been on campus in a really, really long time. So I'm like super, super excited to be back.
Awesome. Yes, go see Catherine at Women in Business too. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.